My friend told my unfaithful wife that her kid looks just like my boss following her extended deception. No genetic connection found, yet she assumed I'd stay with this child I don't even know while I filed for relationship break. Hey everyone, my name is Marcus, and I'm 28 years old. I own a small construction business that I've been running for the past 4 years. It's nothing fancy or glamorous, just enough to pay the bills and keep me busy with steady work. I've got a decent crew and most days are filled with trucks, concrete, and endless invoices. The highlight of my week is usually dealing with elderly homeowners who have perfect driveways, but still manage to find that one spot I allegedly missed and feel compelled to point it out. My wife, well, technically my ex-wife now, is Victoria. She's 25 years old and worked in marketing at this downtown firm. The company acts like they're the next Google or something, complete with shiny offices, strict dress codes, and those endless brainstorming sessions that seem to accomplish nothing. She was completely immersed in that corporate world, while I was out here getting my hands dirty with actual work. We existed in completely different universes, but somehow we made it work for a while. We first met at a friend's barbecue about 3 years ago. She took an immediate liking to my dog, laughed at all my jokes, and for a while, we just clicked perfectly. There was something natural about how we fit together back then. We moved in together after 8 months of dating, and a year later we got married. At the time, I genuinely thought I had hit the jackpot with her. Victoria was everything I thought I wanted in a partner, sharp, funny, and absolutely beautiful. She always acted like she genuinely appreciated how grounded and practical I was. She would constantly tell me that she wanted someone solid and reliable in her life, a man who actually knew how to build things with his hands. Those were her exact words, not mine, and I believed every single one of them. About 3 months after we got married, Victoria told me she was pregnant. I remember being surprised by the news since we hadn't exactly planned it, but I was also genuinely happy about it. Life throws unexpected things at you sometimes, and this felt like one of the good surprises. I was excited and scared all at the same time. The usual mix of emotions that comes with impending parenthood. What struck me as odd was how weirdly calm Victoria seemed about the whole situation. She just smiled and said it was meant to be, like she had somehow expected it all along. Fast forward to about a month ago, and our daughter Sophia is now 7 months old. She's this perfect little bundle of energy, always kicking her feet and being her usual adorable self. Life had settled into a routine that felt comfortable, even if it wasn't always easy with a new baby in the house. This particular Sunday was just like any other, until Victoria's coworker Kelly decided to drop by for a visit. Kelly and Victoria have been close ever since Victoria started working at that marketing firm. They're always texting each other, going out for lunch together, and generally acting like the best of friends. On this day, Kelly came over with some brownies or cupcakes. Honestly, I can't even remember what they were exactly. She said she just wanted to see the baby in person, which seemed innocent enough. It was actually Kelly's first time meeting Sophia face to face. She had been on vacation for a while and had taken some extended time off from work, so this was her first opportunity to see our daughter since she was born. Sophia was sitting in her little bouncer, kicking her tiny feet around and babbling happily, just being her usual cute self and charming everyone in the room. I was lounging on the couch, half watching something mindless on television, while Victoria and Kelly caught up on work gossip and life updates. I was only paying partial attention to their conversation, drifting in and out of focus the way you do when people are discussing things that don't really concern you. It was just typical friend chatter, nothing that seemed particularly important or interesting. Then Kelly bent down to get a closer look at Sophia, studying her little face with that expression people get when they're trying to figure out who a baby resembles. What she said next changed everything. Super casually, but loud enough for everyone to hear, she blurted out, "Oh my God, she looks just like our boss!" I remember sitting up straighter on the couch because something about the comment just sounded completely off. It wasn't the kind of thing you'd normally say about someone's baby, especially not with that particular tone. Victoria's entire demeanor changed in the blink of an eye. Her face went tight and rigid, like she had suddenly forgotten how to control her facial muscles. Then she forced this incredibly awkward laugh and quickly waved Kelly off, saying, "Kelly, shut up. You always say dumb stuff like that." She immediately changed the subject after that, acting like the comment was nothing more than a silly joke that didn't deserve any further discussion. But I couldn't just unhear what Kelly had said. The words kept echoing in my head, and I found myself wondering why someone would make that specific comparison if there wasn't at least some truth to it. Even if it was meant as a joke, Why would Victoria react like someone had just read her entire browser history out loud in church? The whole interaction felt wrong on every level. Later that night, after Kelly had left and we were getting ready for bed, I couldn't shake what had happened earlier. I finally decided to ask Victoria directly about the strange comment. "Why did she say Sophia looks like your boss?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual and non-accusatory. Victoria laughed again, but it felt completely fake and forced, like she was performing for an audience that wasn't buying her act. "Kelly is just like that," she said, with a dismissive wave. "She always jokes around and says dumb stuff like that. You know how she is." The problem was, I didn't know how Kelly was at all. I barely knew her beyond the occasional hello when she'd stop by or when Victoria would mention her in passing. I'd never once heard her make jokes like that before, and something about Victoria's explanation felt rehearsed and hollow. Now my brain was stuck in an endless loop, constantly replaying that moment from earlier in the day. I kept thinking about the way Victoria had reacted, the way Kelly had said it so casually, like it wasn't news to her, and the uncomfortable silence that had immediately filled the room afterward. It felt like I had been missing thousands of subtle clues, and this one random comment had suddenly cracked something wide open that I wasn't prepared to see. I couldn't sleep that night. I spent hours lying next to Victoria, staring at the ceiling while she breathed peacefully beside me, completely unaware of the storm brewing in my head. I found myself thinking about all the times she had mentioned her boss over the past couple of years. His name is Dylan. Yeah, like the musician. And he's older, somewhere in his mid-40s, I think. He's one of those guys who probably has an elaborate skincare routine and a personal trainer. The kind of man who takes care of himself in ways that most working guys like me don't have time or money for. When Victoria first started working at that company, she used to bring Dylan up constantly in our conversations. It was always, "Dylan said this," or "Dylan thinks that," or "Dylan is so brilliant at understanding market trends." At the time, I just assumed she admired him as a mentor and respected his professional expertise. Now, looking back with this new perspective, I wasn't so sure about the nature of that admiration. During those early months at her job, she was always getting home late from meetings or strategy sessions that seemed to run well past normal business hours. I never asked too many questions about it because I trusted her completely, and I figured her industry was just demanding like that. I knew marketing firms operated on tight deadlines and required a lot of collaboration, so late nights seemed par for the course. I was incredibly busy during that same period anyway. Peak construction season meant I was working 14-hour days regularly, trying to stay ahead of contracts and weather delays that could derail entire projects. I was exhausted most nights and didn't have the mental energy to scrutinize her work schedule or question why she seemed to be putting in so many extra hours. But now, lying there in the dark, every late night and every ignored text message was hitting me completely differently. That innocent comment from Kelly didn't feel like a joke anymore. It felt like a mistake, like something she wasn't supposed to say out loud. And Victoria's reaction to it said more than any explanation she could have given me. I've been trying my best not to jump to conclusions about any of this. I know that people say dumb things sometimes without thinking, and I know that coincidences happen more often than we'd like to believe. But there's this pit in my stomach that hasn't gone away since that day, and it's been growing stronger with each passing hour. When you're a guy who works hard every single day to provide for your family and protect the people you love, when you try to be present for your kid and be the father she deserves, only to have some part of you start wondering if she's even your biological child, well, there's no amount of sleep that can fix that kind of uncertainty. I haven't done anything concrete yet about these suspicions. I'm still collecting my thoughts and trying to figure out if I'm being completely paranoid or if there's something real and substantial behind these feelings. But something deep down feels fundamentally wrong, and I don't know how to shake this growing sense of dread. If I do decide to take action and investigate further, I know there's absolutely no going back from whatever I might discover. But if I don't do anything and just try to ignore these doubts, I'm going to slowly go crazy wondering about the truth. The next morning, I woke up and couldn't even look at Victoria the same way I had just 24 hours earlier. I watched her feed Sophia, humming some cheerful song under her breath while she prepared the bottle, acting like she hadn't just been part of the weirdest and most uncomfortable moment of my entire life the day before. It was like she had completely compartmentalized what had happened and moved on without a second thought. I got up from bed, told her I had an early client walkthrough scheduled, and left the house without even stopping to grab my usual morning coffee. The truth was, I had absolutely zero jobs lined up that morning. My only planned destination was a little cafe that happened to be located directly across the street from Victoria's office building. I pulled out my phone and sent Kelly a text message asking if she could meet me for a quick chat. She replied back almost immediately with a simple "sure" and a smiley face emoji. I had no idea what to expect from this conversation, but I desperately needed answers, and she seemed like the only person who might be able to provide them. Kelly showed up about 15 minutes later, looking like she had come straight from the office. She was wearing heels, a professional blazer, and her phone was buzzing with notifications every few seconds. She looked genuinely surprised to see me sitting there, which made perfect sense since I had never asked to talk to her alone before in all the time I'd known her. I didn't want to waste time with small talk or beat around the bush. I told her straight up that I didn't want to start any drama or create problems for anyone involved. I just needed to ask her one direct question and get an honest answer. "Is Victoria spending time with Dylan outside of work?" I asked her, looking directly into her eyes. No fluff, no diplomatic language, just a straightforward question that deserved a straightforward response. Kelly hesitated before answering, but it wasn't the kind of pause you get when someone is confused by what you're asking. It was more like she was carefully choosing her words and thinking about how much she should reveal. "Well, yeah, they're always working late together," she said finally. "They have lots of meetings, and he really trusts her with important projects. They're really close when it comes to collaborating on campaigns." Then she kind of laughed awkwardly and quickly added, "But nothing weird if that's what you're thinking. It's all professional stuff." I nodded politely, thanked her for meeting with me, and paid for her coffee before walking out of the cafe. I didn't say much else because I didn't need to hear anything more. That answer had confirmed more than she probably realized she was revealing. After leaving the cafe, I started replaying countless moments from the past year that I had previously brushed off as insignificant. Things that had seemed perfectly normal at the time now felt loaded with hidden meaning. Like that time I suggested bringing Victoria lunch at work as a surprise. Instead of being pleased or grateful, she had snapped at me, saying it would be weird and inappropriate to have a husband show up unexpectedly in her conference room. At the time, I had accepted her explanation and dropped the idea entirely. Then there was our anniversary dinner that she canceled at the last minute. She claimed there was some kind of campaign emergency that required her immediate attention at the office. I was disappointed, but understood that work emergencies happen in her industry. Later that evening, she posted a story on social media from the office, and there was Dylan clearly visible in the background, holding a glass of what looked like sparkling water and laughing at something off camera. I had noticed it at the time, but didn't think much of it. I also started remembering Victoria's phone habits and how they had gradually changed over the past several months. She used to leave her phone casually around the house like it was no big deal, on the kitchen counter while she cooked, on the coffee table during movies, charging on her nightstand. Lately, that phone had become like a fifth limb attached to her body. It was always face down, always within arm's reach, and she had started keeping all her notifications silenced. If I ever picked up her phone, even just to hand it back to her when she was across the room, she would practically snatch it out of my hands like I was trying to hack into government secrets. The change had been so gradual that I hadn't really processed it as suspicious behavior until now. That afternoon, I couldn't focus on anything productive. I sat in my truck in a Home Depot parking lot for almost 3 hours, just thinking and trying to make sense of everything. Was I being completely crazy? Was I spiraling out of control over one dumb comment from a coworker who might just have a poor sense of humor? But the more I thought about it, the more everything seemed to point towards something being fundamentally wrong with my marriage. It wasn't just recent behavior either. Looking back, I could see patterns going back several months that I had somehow missed or ignored. Victoria had stopped being affectionate with me right after Sophia was born. At the time, she said she was exhausted, stressed out, and still adjusting to motherhood. All of that seemed completely reasonable and understandable. New mothers go through tremendous physical and emotional changes, and I didn't want to pressure her or make her feel guilty about needing space. But even on weekends when she seemed well-rested, even during those rare moments when her mother would take the baby for a few hours and give us some time alone together, Victoria remained distant and emotionally cold. It was like she was living entirely in her own head and had no interest in letting me into whatever was going on in there. Around 7 p.m., I finally drove home to face whatever was waiting for me there. Victoria was in the kitchen making spaghetti, acting like it was just another ordinary Wednesday evening. She seemed completely relaxed and normal, chatting about her day and asking if I wanted garlic bread with dinner. I sat down at the kitchen table and just watched her while she moved around the kitchen. I was trying to study her facial expressions and body language, looking for any signs that might give away guilt or nervousness. But she didn't look guilty or nervous at all. She was just stirring sauce and asking mundane questions about dinner, seemingly without a care in the world. I told her yes to the garlic bread and then ate the entire meal in complete silence, my mind racing with everything I had learned and suspected throughout the day. Later that night, once Sophia was finally asleep and we were both lying in bed, I decided I couldn't keep these doubts bottled up any longer. I looked over at Victoria and said the words that would change everything between us. I want a DNA test. She immediately crossed her arms and stared at me like I had suddenly grown another head right there in front of her. The look on her face was a mixture of shock, confusion, and something that might have been fear. "Is this because of what Kelly said?" she asked, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "Because that was obviously a joke. She always says dumb stuff like that. I already told you that. You know how she messes around with her comments." I tried to keep my voice calm and measured. "I'm not accusing you of anything specific," I said. "I just need to know for myself. I need this question answered definitively." Victoria got defensive immediately, and I could see her building up to a full argument. She called my request insulting and said I was acting insecure and paranoid. She reminded me that she had carried that baby for 9 full months, that she had gone through labor and delivery, and that she hadn't had a decent night's sleep since Sophia was born. "If you really loved me," she said, her voice getting more emotional, "you would never ask something like that. You would trust me completely." I looked at her and said, "Love doesn't erase doubt, Victoria. And right now, I'm living with a giant question mark hanging over my head. I can't just pretend it's not there." Victoria got quiet for a moment, then looked at me with a flat, determined expression and said, "No, I'm not doing that. I'm not submitting my daughter to some test because you're feeling insecure." She rolled over, turned off the lamp on her side of the bed, and acted like the conversation was completely settled and over. But it wasn't settled for me, not even close. If anything, her refusal to agree to the test only made my suspicions stronger. A few days later, I waited until Victoria left the house to go grocery shopping. The moment her car pulled out of the driveway, I went straight to Sophia's room. I grabbed one of her recently used pacifiers from the diaper bag, carefully sealed it in a clean Ziploc bag, and labeled it with the date and time. I immediately went online and ordered a home DNA testing kit, paying extra for the rush service so I could get results as quickly as possible. I overnighted the kit along with my own saliva sample, following all the instructions precisely. My hands were literally shaking the entire time I was preparing everything for shipment. I kept telling myself that I was being completely crazy, that I was making something massive out of absolutely nothing. But deep down in my gut, I already had a terrible feeling about what the results would show. I just wasn't ready to admit it to myself yet. The day after I sent the samples in, Victoria came looking for the pacifier I had taken. "Hey, have you seen Sophia's pacifier anywhere?" she asked, checking around the living room. I shrugged casually and suggested, "Maybe it rolled under the couch or something. You know how those things disappear." She didn't question my explanation or seem suspicious about it. She just pulled out a brand new pacifier from the cabinet and went about her day like nothing had happened. That entire week, I had to act completely normal while waiting for the results that would either confirm or destroy my worst fears. I went to work every day, took care of equipment maintenance, played with Sophia when I got home, and kissed Victoria on the cheek like everything was perfectly fine between us. I was pretending that our world wasn't potentially about to fall apart while I waited for the truth to arrive in my email inbox. The email finally arrived on a Friday afternoon while I was out back cleaning up after a particularly messy job. One of my crew members had left the concrete mixer completely clogged with dried cement, and I was elbow deep in concrete dust and debris when I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the notification on my screen. Everything around me just stopped. The noise from the equipment, the sounds of traffic in the distance, even my own breathing seemed to pause. The subject line read, "DNA test results. View secure document." I didn't even open the email right away. I just stared at that notification like if I waited long enough, maybe it would somehow disappear or get replaced with a promotional email or spam message, or literally anything else that wouldn't destroy my life. Eventually, I walked over to my truck, sat in the driver's seat, and opened the email with trembling fingers. I wish I could say there was some kind of dramatic moment when I read the results, or that I broke down crying or screamed at the top of my lungs. But it wasn't like that at all. It was just a simple line of text, cold and clinical and absolutely final. Probability of paternity, 0%. That was it. No ambiguity, no room for interpretation, no margin of error. Just a stark, undeniable number that changed everything I thought I knew about my life. I read that line 3 separate times to make absolutely sure I wasn't misunderstanding something. But there was no way to misread that result. 0%. Sophia wasn't mine. I wasn't her father. I never had been. From the moment Sophia was born, my entire world had revolved around her. When she smiled at me for the first time, it felt like the universe had stopped spinning just for that perfect moment. I wasn't just playing the role of a dad or going through the motions of parenthood. I was her father, completely and totally, heart and soul. Every little coo, every tiny giggle, every time her small hand wrapped around my finger, it reinforced that unbreakable bond I thought we shared. Now it was like someone had reached inside my chest and ripped out a piece of me that I didn't even know could be lost. The foundation of everything I believed about my family had just crumbled into dust. I honestly don't know how long I sat there in that truck. I just gripped the steering wheel with both hands, feeling this tight, suffocating sensation in my chest. It was the kind of feeling where you can't tell if you're going to scream or throw up or both. But I didn't do anything. I just sat there feeling this weird, hollow emptiness spreading through my entire body. It was like someone had reached in and turned the volume down on my whole world. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I finally drove home. I was still wearing my work boots and still covered in concrete dust from head to toe. Victoria was in the living room bouncing Sophia on her knee, both of them looking happy and content. Victoria looked up at me and smiled like absolutely nothing was wrong. Like this was just another normal day in our perfect little family. I told her I was exhausted and needed to lie down for a while. She offered to bring me some tea, and I declined as politely as I could manage. I didn't say anything about the test results. Not yet. I needed time to figure out exactly what my next move was going to be. The thing is, as much as I wanted to explode and confront her right there in that moment, I knew I had to be smart about this situation. If I lost control and started screaming, she would find a way to spin the whole thing. She would cry and manipulate and somehow turn herself into the victim of my unreasonable behavior. I needed to get my ducks in a row before I dropped this bomb on her. I needed legal backup, financial protection, and a solid exit plan. If Victoria was capable of lying to me about something this massive and life-altering, then who knows what else she might be capable of doing to protect herself. I wasn't about to get burned twice by being naive about her potential for deception. That night, after she had fallen asleep, I quietly pulled out my laptop and started going through absolutely everything that connected our lives together. I methodically reviewed bank accounts, insurance policies, the house title, and anywhere else her name was linked to mine financially or legally. I made a comprehensive list of every joint asset we had accumulated during our marriage, no matter how small or insignificant it seemed. The next day, I started making discreet phone calls to figure out exactly how to protect what was rightfully mine. I wasn't going to let her destroy my financial stability on top of everything else she had already taken from me. I also sent an email to my lawyer, the same guy who had helped me when I was setting up my construction business. I told him I needed immediate help filing for divorce and that I wanted to know the fastest possible way to get my name removed from Sophia's birth certificate. He called me back later that same day, and I'll never forget what he said to me. "You're lucky you got ahead of this situation, Marcus. Most guys don't figure it out until it's way too late to protect themselves properly." He gave me a complete rundown of my options and the legal process ahead. Most importantly, he told me not to confront Victoria until all the paperwork was officially filed and legal protections were firmly in place. So I kept my mouth shut and continued the charade for a little while longer. Over the next few days, I methodically went through the process of separating my life from hers. I changed my direct deposit to flow into a new private account that only I had access to. I set up a P.O. box specifically for receiving legal mail that Victoria wouldn't be able to intercept or monitor. I started quietly stashing all my essential documents, passport, social security card, business records, insurance papers, into a locked drawer in my office where she would never think to look. It felt like I was preparing for a hurricane that had already started forming on the horizon. Every step I took was designed to minimize the damage she could inflict once the truth finally came out. The weirdest part of this entire process was having to pretend that everything was completely normal between us. Every single time I saw Sophia, I felt this painful tightness in my chest. She still reached for me when I walked into the room, still smiled that beautiful baby smile when I talked to her. But now I couldn't unsee the truth that had been staring me in the face for months. Looking at her closely, I could finally see how much she actually resembled Dylan. The same eye shape, the same nose structure, even some of the same facial expressions. I had been completely blind to the obvious because I wanted a family so desperately that I ignored every red flag Victoria had been waving in my face. Victoria must have sensed that something was different about my behavior, because she started acting extra sweet and attentive. She began cooking elaborate meals more frequently, asking if I was feeling okay more often than usual, and even tried initiating intimacy in bed, which hadn't happened in months. It was like she could sense the storm approaching and was trying to batten down the hatches. A few days later, my lawyer sent me a text confirming that all the divorce papers were ready to be filed with the court. I went down to his office to sign everything that needed my signature. It felt completely surreal, like I was signing myself out of my own life and into some alternate reality I had never planned for. But it also felt like relief, like the air was finally starting to clear after months of suffocating confusion. On the drive home from the lawyer's office, I stopped by the post office to pick up a physical copy of the DNA results. I wanted to have the hard evidence in my hands, just in case I needed to present it during the confrontation that was coming soon. I knew I was going to tell Victoria the truth very soon. I was just waiting for the perfect moment when all my legal protections were in place. And honestly, part of me wanted to see exactly how long she would continue lying directly to my face, now that I knew the complete truth about everything. Now that I knew the truth, I didn't have to wait long to see exactly how deep her deception ran. That weekend, Victoria casually brought up the idea of taking Sophia to visit her parents for a few days. She asked if I wanted to come along and make it a family trip. I told her no without offering any explanation. She pushed the topic a little bit, asking why I had been acting so distant and withdrawn lately. The irony of her asking me about being distant wasn't lost on me, considering she had been living a complete lie for the better part of a year. So I decided to give her one final opportunity to come clean. I looked her directly in the eyes and asked, "Victoria, is there anything you need to tell me? Anything at all?" She blinked and looked genuinely confused by the question. "Like what?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I didn't say anything in response. I just continued staring at her, giving her the space to fill the silence with whatever truth she might be ready to share. But she didn't take the opportunity. Instead, she got defensive about my behavior. "Why are you being like this?" she demanded. "You've been acting really weird for days now, and I don't understand what's going on with you." I told her that we would talk later, and we definitely would. I just wasn't ready to have that conversation until every single legal protection was locked firmly in place. By that point in the process, it wasn't even about emotions anymore. I was past the anger, past the grief, past all the messy feelings that had been consuming me for weeks. I just wanted out. I wanted a clean break from this entire situation. She could continue lying all she wanted to. I already had the truth, documented and verified. And very soon, she would have that truth delivered to her in official legal writing. It was on a Thursday evening when I finally decided to pull the pin on this whole charade. I had everything prepared and ready to go. There was absolutely nothing left for me to arrange or organize. The only remaining task was the part I knew would be messy and painful, actually telling Victoria what I had discovered. I waited until after we had finished dinner and cleaned up the kitchen. Sophia was babbling happily in her high chair, smashing pieces of banana around her tray like she was creating some kind of abstract art masterpiece. I watched both of them for a long moment, struck by how natural and normal this domestic scene had become. Not the family part. I now knew that was built on lies, but just the routine of it all. Me working all day, her pretending everything was fine. Both of us pretending together that we had a real marriage. It had become so habitual and automatic that it was easy to forget how fundamentally fake every moment really was. After Sophia was finally down for the night, I sat on the couch while Victoria settled next to me, scrolling through her phone like it was any other ordinary evening. I decided not to ease into the topic or do the whole dramatic "we need to talk" build-up. I just said it flat and steady, letting the words hang in the air between us. "I got the results back. She's not mine." Her fingers stopped moving on her phone screen immediately. She didn't look up at me right away, and I could watch her processing what I had just said in real time. I could see the way her facial expression changed, the way her breathing pattern shifted slightly. She was caught, and she knew it. "What are you talking about?" she said finally, turning to face me. But her voice was already cracking around the edges, betraying the fear she was trying to hide. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said calmly. The DNA test. I used her pacifier. I got the results back and it shows 0% probability of paternity. You don't have to keep pretending anymore. For a few seconds, she just stared at me in complete silence. I don't know if she was frantically trying to come up with some new lie to tell me, or if she was hoping I would start shouting and screaming so she could flip the script and play the victim again. But when I didn't lose my temper, when I just sat there looking directly at her with complete calm, she finally crumbled under the weight of the truth. "I can't believe you don't trust me," she said, and I actually had to laugh out loud at the audacity of that response. That's what she chose to open with, not, "I'm sorry," not, "Let me explain what happened," but another desperate attempt to turn this situation around and make me the bad guy. "It's not about trust anymore, Victoria," I told her firmly. "It's about facts. The paper says what it says. I don't need your version of events or your explanations. The science speaks for itself." She stood up abruptly and started pacing around the living room like she was preparing to give some kind of important speech. "You completely blindsided me with this," she said, her voice rising with indignation. "We could have talked about this like adults. We could have worked through whatever doubts you were having together." I looked at her with complete disbelief. "You had 7 full months to talk to me," I said. "You had a chance every single day to tell me the truth about what was really going on. But instead, you let me name her. You let me stay up all night with her when she was sick. You let me think I was her father while you lied directly to my face every single day. Then came the waterworks. Whether the tears were real or completely manufactured, I honestly don't know anymore. And I don't particularly care." She collapsed into the armchair and started sobbing dramatically, saying things like, "It wasn't like that, and I didn't mean for any of this to happen," between gasps for air. I didn't interrupt her performance or try to comfort her. I just let her cry and waited for her to actually start talking. I wasn't going to fall for the emotional manipulation this time, not after everything I had discovered. Eventually, between the sobs and the gasping, she started admitting what I already knew to be true. She confirmed that it was Dylan, just like I had suspected all along. She said it had happened a few times when she was working those late nights at the office. She claimed that she thought the affair would just end naturally, and that it wasn't anything serious or meaningful. She said she never planned to lie to me about the pregnancy. She just didn't know how to fix the situation after the pregnancy test came back positive, and she panicked about telling me the truth. I asked her the question that I needed answered most. "Did you know I wasn't the father when you first told me you were pregnant?" She hesitated for a long moment, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Even if she had said no immediately, I wouldn't have believed her at that point. "I wasn't completely sure," she said finally, which was obviously another lie designed to minimize her guilt. Then she tried to justify her behavior by saying she was scared and thought I would leave her if she told me the truth from the beginning. I told her that wasn't fear. That was pure selfishness. "I might have actually stayed if you had told me the truth early on," I said. "If you had been honest with me from the very beginning, we could have figured something out together. But lying to me every single day for nearly a year, that wasn't fear, Victoria. That was choosing your own comfort and convenience over basic respect for me as a human being." Then she asked me the question that really pushed me over the edge. She looked at me with her tear-streaked face and said, "So what now? Are you really going to just walk away from her? From Sophia?" I felt this intense pressure building up behind my ribs, and I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs. But I managed to keep it together and respond calmly. "She's not mine," I said quietly but firmly. "You made that decision when you chose to lie to me. I would have done absolutely anything for her. I thought I was her dad, but that belief was based on a lie that you created and actively protected for months. So yeah, I'm walking away from something that never should have started in the first place." She looked at me like I had physically slapped her across the face. I think deep down, she had genuinely believed that I would cave under pressure, that I would feel too guilty about abandoning a baby to actually follow through with leaving. But I was completely past the point of guilt by then. All I had left was absolute clarity about what needed to happen next. "I've already filed the divorce papers," I added matter-of-factly. "You'll be served with them sometime this week. I've also filed the legal petition to remove my name from Sophia's birth certificate. I'm not going to be paying child support for a child that isn't mine. Dylan will have to step up and take responsibility, or he won't. That's your problem to figure out now, not mine." That final piece of information completely broke her. She started begging me not to go through with it, saying over and over again that she had been stupid and made terrible mistakes. She even tried to bring Sophia into the conversation again as emotional leverage. "She loves you, Marcus. Victoria said desperately. "She absolutely lights up every time you walk into the room. That has to mean something important, doesn't it?" I looked at her with complete detachment and said, "Yeah, it means you used me really well. You convinced me I was her father, so of course she responds to me that way. But that bond was built on a foundation of lies." She cried even harder after I said that. She started talking about how she had nowhere to go and no idea what she was going to do now. She said her family didn't know the real truth about what had happened, and she couldn't tell them because they would never forgive her for what she had done. I told her that none of that was my problem anymore. She had made a series of conscious decisions over many months, and now she had to live with the consequences of those choices. I wasn't going to be her safety net or her backup plan any longer. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I packed a bag with essential items and went to stay at my buddy's place for a while. I didn't even say goodbye to Sophia before I left, and that hurt more than I want to admit or think about. But I knew it was the cleanest way to handle the separation. I was afraid that if I held her one more time, if I let myself believe in that connection just once more, I might hesitate when I needed to stay strong. And I couldn't afford to hesitate anymore. I blocked Victoria's phone number the next morning so she couldn't try to manipulate me with desperate calls and text messages. My lawyer confirmed that all the paperwork was properly filed and would be processed according to the court's schedule. I told him to keep me updated on any major developments, but to only call me if something absolutely required my immediate attention. I didn't leave a note for Victoria, and I didn't leave any kind of farewell message. I figured that after everything she had put me through, she didn't deserve any parting words from me. She had already gotten more of me than she had any right to expect. About 3 weeks after I moved out, I started hearing things about what was happening with Victoria through our mutual friends, old coworkers, and even my sister, who apparently still follows her on social media. I wasn't actively looking for updates about her situation, but information started trickling in anyway, whether I wanted it or not. Apparently, Victoria did exactly what I had predicted she would do. She went straight to Dylan and told him the truth about Sophia's paternity. But of course, she didn't tell him the complete truth. She only shared the version that made her look like an innocent victim who had been abandoned and needed his help. According to what I heard, that strategy backfired on her spectacularly and almost immediately. Dylan wasn't some naive young guy who could be easily manipulated or controlled. He was a married man in his 40s with a professional reputation to protect and a high-paying job that he wasn't willing to risk for anything. So when Victoria showed up expecting him to play the role of her white knight, he did exactly what a guy like that always does. He ran for cover as fast as possible. He went straight to HR and told them that Victoria was creating a hostile work environment at the office. He claimed that she was spreading false rumors about him and making accusations that he had never agreed to or acknowledged. He flipped the entire situation back on her so quickly that it gave everyone involved whiplash. Within just 1 week of her going to him for help, she was placed on suspension pending an investigation. The week after that, she was officially fired from her job. Just like that, her entire career at the company was over. Dylan had thrown her completely under the bus to save his own skin and protect his marriage. I have to admit, I didn't feel even a tiny bit of sympathy for her when I heard about what happened. That might sound cold and heartless to some people, but after everything she had done to me, after stealing nearly a full year of my life and making me believe I was someone's father when I wasn't, I couldn't find even an ounce of compassion for her situation. Actions have real consequences, and she had made her choices. This time, she couldn't charm her way out of the mess she had created for herself. Of course, she tried to get me involved in her problems anyway. One evening when I was coming back from a construction job, I noticed I had a voicemail from an unknown number. I usually ignore those completely, but something told me to listen to this one. It was Victoria, and she sounded completely different from the confident woman I had married. Her voice was worn down and shaking, like she had already been crying for hours before she even called me. "Hey, it's me," the message began. "I know you probably won't listen to this, but I didn't know who else I could call. Sophia's been sick with a fever for 3 days straight, and I don't know what to do about it. Dylan won't answer any of my calls or texts, and I don't have anyone else to turn to. You were always there for her when she needed you. She misses you so much, and honestly, I miss you too. Please, Marcus, I'm begging you to help me." I didn't even finish listening to the entire message. I deleted it halfway through and went about my evening like nothing had happened. She left another voicemail the next night with more of the same desperate begging. This time, she said she had finally realized how badly she had messed up everything between us. She claimed that I was the only real man who had ever stuck around and been dependable, and she knew now that Dylan was never going to help her with anything. She said she felt incredibly stupid for thinking he would be some kind of hero who would rescue her from the situation. That message actually made me laugh out loud. The sheer nerve of her to say something like that after everything she had put me through. Like I was some kind of backup plan she could just return to now that her fantasy romance had fallen apart completely. I didn't call her back, and I didn't send any text messages. I also didn't respond to the email she sent me the next day, which was full of recent photos of Sophia mixed in with some older pictures from when I was still living with them. The photos had captions like, "She still sleeps with the teddy bear you bought for her," and "Look how much she's grown since you left." As if seeing pictures of a baby I had been tricked into loving would somehow change the fundamental facts of the situation. That same week, I unexpectedly ran into Victoria's sister Melissa at the grocery store. We had never been particularly close, but she had always seemed to like me well enough during family gatherings. She stopped me in the cereal aisle and gave me a look that was equal parts pity and guilt. "She's not doing well at all, Marcus," Melissa said quietly. "She cries constantly and she can barely afford to buy diapers for the baby." I nodded politely, grabbed my box of cereal from the shelf and said, "Then maybe you should help her out. It's not my problem anymore." Melissa didn't try to argue with me or push the issue further. She just sighed deeply and said, "You didn't deserve any of what happened to you. I just thought you should know how things are going." Then she walked away without saying anything else. That brief interaction stuck with me longer than I expected it to, not because I felt sorry for Victoria, but because it confirmed something I had been wondering about. She still hadn't told her family the complete story about what had really happened between us. They knew that something had gone wrong in our marriage, they knew she had lost her job, and they knew that I had left. But she was still painting herself as the poor, abandoned single mother who got left behind by her heartless husband. There was no mention to her family about the cheating, no mention of the lies, and certainly no mention of the paternity fraud. Just the sanitized version where she gets all the sympathy, and I look like the terrible guy who walked out on his responsibilities. I could have easily gone public with the whole story if I had wanted to. I could have posted the DNA results on social media for everyone to see. I could have aired out all the dirty details and let everyone know exactly who Victoria really was behind the facade she presented to the world. But I didn't do any of that. It wasn't because I was trying to protect her reputation or spare her feelings. I simply didn't care enough about her anymore to bother with the effort. I had already won this battle in the ways that actually mattered to me. She had to live every single day in the mess she had created for herself, and that felt like enough justice for me. That weekend, she decided to escalate her desperation by showing up at my place unannounced. I was sitting on my couch eating leftover pizza and half watching some random YouTube video when I heard knocking at my front door. It wasn't a normal, polite knock either. It was frantic and urgent, like someone trying to get inside before a storm hit, except the sky outside was perfectly clear. I looked through the peephole and saw Victoria standing there holding Sophia on her hip. She was wearing a hoodie and had this desperate, exhausted look on her face like she hadn't slept properly in days. I didn't open the door, and I didn't move from where I was standing. I just watched through the peephole as she knocked again and again. Like maybe I would magically forget everything she had done to me if she was persistent enough. She stood out there for almost 15 minutes, talking through the door like I was actually listening to her. I could hear her saying things like, "I just want to talk to you," and "She misses you so much," and "You're still her dad, Marcus. You always will be." She kept repeating variations of the same desperate pleas over and over again. Eventually, she gave up and walked back to her car. I waited until I heard her drive away completely before I opened the front door to see if she had left anything behind. There was a folded piece of paper on my welcome mat, written in her handwriting. The note said, "You'll always be her dad. That doesn't change just because of some test. She still cries for you every night. Please just come see her once. I'm begging you, Marcus." I read the note exactly once, then closed the door behind me. I walked into the kitchen, grabbed the lighter from my junk drawer, and burned the note right there in the sink. I watched every word turn to ash and felt absolutely nothing about it. The next day, I called my lawyer and had him draft a cease and desist letter. No more messages, no more surprise visits, no more contact of any kind. I had made my decision about this situation, and I was completely done being pulled back into her drama and manipulation. Sophia wasn't mine, and as much as that truth hurt me on some level, I wasn't going to keep paying the emotional and financial price for someone else's lies. I packed up the last of the baby stuff that week. The leftover diapers, the toys I had bought, the clothes she had never grown into because I left before she was big enough. I donated everything to a local shelter. It was harder than I thought it would be, boxing up all those reminders. There were several moments where I hesitated, holding a tiny onesie or a pair of little shoes that I had picked out myself in the store. But I forced myself to do it anyway because keeping any of it would have meant I was still holding on to something that had never really existed in the first place. This entire chapter of my life is now closed. Not because it ended naturally or because we grew apart, but because I slammed it shut with absolute finality, and I am never opening it again. I was ready to move forward and leave everything in the rearview mirror where it belonged. I wasn't angry anymore. I had moved past that emotion entirely. I was just detached. The kind of complete detachment that comes from watching your whole world fall apart and realizing that you can still breathe, still function, still build a life for yourself afterward. But there was one loose end that kept tugging at my conscience, no matter how much I tried to ignore it. Dylan, the man who had gotten my wife pregnant and destroyed my marriage. The man who knew Victoria was married, knew she had a family, and still chose to mess around with her like it was some harmless office fling. The man who was also married himself and had his own family at home. He had never faced a single real consequence for his actions. At least not the kind of consequences that actually count for something. Sure, he had thrown Victoria under the bus to save himself, and he had walked away from the situation like it was just another HR cleanup that didn't concern him personally. Meanwhile, I had been left picking up the pieces of a life that I didn't even build, dealing with the aftermath of decisions I never made. I didn't do anything about Dylan right away. Honestly, I didn't care about getting revenge or making him pay for what he had done. That wasn't what motivated me to eventually take action. But one day I got curious and decided to look him up online, just to see what kind of life he was living while the rest of us dealt with the wreckage he had helped create. I found his LinkedIn profile easily enough, of course. He was listed as a top executive at his marketing firm, still posting motivational quotes and teamwork makes the dream work nonsense, like he was some kind of inspirational business leader. But what really caught my attention was his personal social media presence, particularly his wife's public Facebook page. Her name was Christina, and she had the same last name as Dylan. Right there in her bio, it said, "Married to Dylan for 12 years, proud mom of 2 beautiful children." I clicked through some of their family photos, and their life looked like something straight out of a picture frame display at a department store. They had 2 kids, a nice house in what looked like an expensive neighborhood, and recent vacation photos from the Bahamas. Everything about their online presence screamed successful, happy family living the American dream. I sat there staring at those photos for a long time, thinking about the situation. This man had a complete, established life with people who loved and depended on him. And while he was playing the role of devoted husband and father in front of his wife and children, he was also sleeping with my wife and creating a child that he had no intention of acknowledging or supporting. The moment things got inconvenient for him, he had thrown Victoria aside like she was disposable garbage. I wasn't mad at him specifically for what had happened between him and Victoria. Adults make their own choices, and they both knew what they were doing was wrong. But I was furious about how easy it had been for him to walk away completely untouched by any consequences while everyone else suffered. So I made a decision that felt right to me at the time. I wasn't going to send his wife some anonymous message or try to expose him through social media. I wasn't going to tiptoe around the situation or handle it with kid gloves. I was going to look Christina directly in the eyes and tell her the truth about her husband, the same way I would have wanted someone to do for me if I had been in her position. It wasn't particularly difficult to find out where they lived. Public records and property databases made it easy to cross-reference addresses with just a few clicks here and there. I want to be clear that I wasn't stalking them or doing anything creepy. I just wanted to deliver one crucial piece of information to her and then leave their lives forever. I decided that she deserved to know exactly who she was really married to, beyond the carefully constructed facade he presented to the world. I showed up at their house on a Saturday morning around 10 a.m. I knocked on the front door and waited patiently for someone to answer. Christina opened it wearing a casual sweater and leggings, no makeup, and holding a coffee mug that said, "Number 1 Mom" in cheerful letters. I introduced myself politely and directly. "Hi, I'm Marcus. You don't know me, but I used to be married to someone your husband knows quite well from work." She looked confused but remained polite and welcoming. "Okay," she said, waiting for me to continue. "Her name is Victoria, and they work together at the marketing firm," I said. "Right. What's this about exactly?" "I'm not here to start trouble or cause problems for your family." I said calmly. "But I think you deserve to know that your husband had an ongoing affair with my wife and that she had his baby. She's about 8 months old now." The coffee mug almost slipped from her hand. I watched her face go through a series of emotions: disbelief, confusion, and then something much more raw and painful. She stepped outside and closed the door behind her, like she didn't want her children to overhear what we were discussing. "Are you serious about this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded gravely. "I have DNA proof that confirms everything. I raised that baby for 7 months thinking she was mine, until I found out through testing that she wasn't. My ex-wife admitted the whole thing when I confronted her with the evidence." Christina didn't cry, and she didn't scream at me. She just stared down at the ground like her brain had completely left the building and she couldn't process what I had just told her. After about a minute of silence, she looked up at me and asked, "Why are you telling me this? What do you want from me?" "Because you deserve better than being lied to," I said honestly. "I would have wanted someone to tell me the truth if I had been in your situation. I wish someone had given me a heads up before I wasted a year of my life raising another man's child." She shook her head slowly, like she couldn't believe any of what I was saying was actually real. "He told me she was just someone from work," she said quietly. "He said there was just some drama happening at the office with a female employee. He told me she got fired for making stuff up about him and spreading false rumors." "She didn't make anything up," I said firmly. "She tried to tell him that he was the father of her baby, and he completely ghosted her. HR swept the whole thing under the rug to protect him, but I've got every message, every voicemail, and a kid who looks exactly like him. The evidence speaks for itself." Christina went quiet again, processing everything I had just revealed to her. Then she looked at me with a determined expression and said, "Can you send me the proof? I need to see everything." I had come prepared for exactly this request. I had printed copies of the DNA results, screenshots of text messages, and other relevant documentation, all organized in a file folder. I handed her the folder, and she held it like it weighed 100 pounds. I told her that I wasn't there seeking revenge, and I meant that completely. "Whatever you decide to do with this information, that's entirely your business," I said. "I just didn't want to walk away from this situation, knowing that he could keep lying to you while someone else is left to raise his child alone." She nodded, still looking somewhat frozen by the enormity of what she had just learned. "Thank you for telling me," she said simply. I left their house after that brief conversation. I didn't ask for any follow-up information, and I didn't need to know what would happen next between them. I had delivered the truth, and now it was up to her to decide what to do with it. About a week later, I received a single text message from a random phone number that I didn't recognize. The message was short and to the point. "We got divorced, and he moved out." I didn't reply to the text, and I didn't try to contact Christina again. That was the end of my involvement in their situation, and it felt like the right place to close that chapter. There was no dramatic closure to any of this, and there was no satisfaction from watching Dylan suffer the consequences of his actions. But knowing that Christina finally knew the truth, that the carefully constructed mask had come off, and he had to face the reality of his choices in his own home, was enough for me. Sometimes the truth doesn't come with applause or elaborate revenge plots. Sometimes it just shows up quiet and clear, and it lets the chips fall wherever they're going to fall. And for once in this entire ordeal, I didn't have to be the one left picking up those scattered pieces and trying to put them back together. This whole experience taught me that truth has its own power, even when it's painful, and even when it destroys things that seemed solid and permanent. I learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was, and that I can walk away from situations that are toxic to my well-being, even when walking away means giving up things I thought I wanted. I'm building a new life now, one that's based on honesty and self-respect rather than lies and false promises. It's not the life I had planned for myself a year ago, but it's mine, and it's real, and that makes all the difference in the world.